Sophia had always been fascinated by the macabre. An aspiring journalist, she often sought out the stories that others shied away from. So when she heard about the island of the dolls in Xochimilco, she knew she had to visit. She convinced her boyfriend, Miguel, to accompany her on the journey, promising that it would be an adventure they would never forget. They arrived in Xochimilco on a sweltering afternoon, the air thick with humidity and the scent of the canals. The boat ride to the island was eerily quiet. Their guide, a weathered old man named Alejandro, barely spoke a word. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water against the boat and the distant cries of birds. As they approached the island, Sophia felt a chill despite the heat. The trees were draped with hundreds of dolls, their vacant eyes staring down at them. Some were missing limbs, others were decayed, their faces twisted into grotesque expressions. "This is it," Alejandro said gruffly, tying the boat to the dock. "Be respectful. The spirits here don't like to be disturbed." Sophia and Miguel exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. They stepped onto the island, the oppressive atmosphere wrapping around them like a shroud. As they explored, Sophia snapped pictures and took notes, her excitement growing despite the eerie surroundings. Miguel, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The dolls seemed to follow him with their eyes, and he swore he heard faint whispers carried on the breeze. "Do you hear that?" he asked Sophia, who was engrossed in her work. "Hear what?" she replied, looking up from her notebook. "The whispering," Miguel said, his voice trembling. "It sounds like children." Sophia paused, listening intently. At first, she heard nothing, but then, just on the edge of perception, she heard it too. A faint, almost inaudible whispering, like the distant voices of children. "Maybe it's just the wind," she suggested, though she didn't quite believe it herself. They continued their exploration, but the whispering grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from all directions, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. Miguel grew increasingly agitated, his nerves frayed by the constant murmuring. "We should leave," he finally said. "This place isn't right. Just a little longer," Sophia pleaded. "I'm almost done." Reluctantly, Miguel agreed, but his unease only grew. The whispers now seemed to form words, and he could swear they were calling his name. As dusk fell, Sophia and Miguel made their way to the heart of the island, where a small, dilapidated shack stood. According to local legend, this was where Don Julian Santana had lived and died. The air grew colder as they approached, and the whispering intensified. Inside the shack, they found more dolls, these ones arranged in a crude circle. In the center lay an old, weathered diary. Sophia picked it up, flipping through the pages with growing fascination. "It's Don Julian's diary," she whispered. "He wrote about the girl he found, about how he started hanging the dolls to appease her spirit. But there's something else." She turned to the final entry, dated the day he died. "The girl's spirit isn't alone. There's something darker here, something that feeds on fear and sorrow. I think it's coming for me." As Sophia read the words aloud, the whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. Miguel felt a sudden, overwhelming dread. "We need to go, now." But as they turned to leave, the shack door slammed shut, and the temperature plummeted. The doll's eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, and a low, sinister laugh echoed around them. "Who's there?" Sophia demanded, her voice shaking. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a girl, no more than 10 years old, her dress wet and tattered. Her eyes were hollow, and her expression was one of deep sadness. "You found my diary," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "You know the truth." "What truth?" Sophia asked, her fear giving way to curiosity. "The darkness," the girl replied. "It's been here for centuries, feeding on those who come. Julian tried to stop it, but he couldn't. Now it's your turn." The air grew colder still, and a dark, shadowy form began to materialize behind the girl. It was a twisted, monstrous shape, its eyes burning with malevolence. "Run!" Miguel shouted, grabbing Sophia's hand. They bolted from the shack, but the darkness followed, its laughter echoing through the trees. The dolls seemed to come to life, their heads turning to watch the chase, their whispers rising to a fever pitch. As they ran, Sophia remembered something she had read in the diary. "Wait," she cried, pulling Miguel to a stop. "The locket." "What locket?" Miguel asked, panic in his voice. Julian mentioned a locket that belonged to the girl. He said it was the key to appeasing the spirits and banishing the darkness. "It must be in the shack." They turned back, racing against time. The darkness was almost upon them, its cold breath on their necks. Bursting into the shack, Sophia frantically searched the circle of dolls, and there, hanging around the neck of a particularly decrepit doll, was a small, silver locket. She snatched it up and turned to face the girl in the shadowy form. "Is this what you want?" she shouted. The girl nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "It was my mother's. I lost it when I drowned." Sophia opened the locket, revealing a tiny photo of a woman and a child. She held it out, and the girl reached for it, her fingers passing through it like mist. As the locket passed to the girl's hand, the darkness shrieked, its form dissolving into the night. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth. The girl smiled, her expression peaceful at last. "Thank you," she whispered, her form fading until she was gone. Sophia and Miguel stood in silence, the island now eerily quiet but no longer threatening. The dolls hung limply in the trees, their eyes no longer following them. As they made their way back to the boat, Alejandro was waiting, a knowing look in his eyes. "You did it," he said simply. Sophia nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. "I think she's finally at peace." They left the island as the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, the water calm and serene. Sophia knew she had found a story worth telling, one of tragedy and redemption. And as they sailed away, she felt a gentle, reassuring presence with them, a sweet ending to a haunting tale.